Moriel, you've done something that I've wished that I could do for a long time. You've spoken to many, many, many Muslims. That's why you're here talking to me, right? And that's you've actually written a book about it that we can discuss also later. Uh, I have spoken to quite a few Muslims, but most of them won't speak to me when they hear that I'm a Jew or that I grew up in Israel or something like that. And or many of them would speak to me, but they won't come online here and record a conversation, even though I usually try not to be combative and I really just want to listen. So well, I wanna I wanna listen to all you have to say and to all of your experiences and probably ask you some questions about it. So, what can you tell me? I don't know, pick a couple of interesting conversations that you've had and some insights that you might have, because I imagine that the narratives and the things that you think are obvious to you as your basic narrative structure, um, these things are probably not the same with them. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, what you mentioned that you and probably lots of other people would love to speak to Arabs and Muslims around the world and try to understand, what they actually think. So I think the main problem is really the language barrier, which is number one. So the way I got past that is, first of all, I speak English fluently, which helps, but I also studied Arabic. I learned Arabic, the spoken dialect, and that way I was able to just have conversations, normal conversations with Arabic speakers from all over Israel, Arab Israelis and those who live in Judea and Samaria, even those who live in Gaza, and also Arabs from all over the world, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, all the different places. And being able to actually speak the language gave me a really big advantage. Also, because when I speak English, I have a pretty good American accent because I grew up in the States in New York. So no one was really able to know that I'm Jewish or Israeli. So a lot of times I would actually hide that fact, and I would just tell them that I'm American, or I would even write to them in Arabic. And then they would think that I'm an Arab living in the States, like from Syria or something like that. So I was kind of able to have these two cover stories, one that I'm just a regular American and one that I'm even an Arab who immigrated to the United States. And that way I was just able to speak to people and start asking them all these questions that really interested me at the time.
wait, I'm
And
gonna
I
stop
kept,
you for a second.
yeah.
Why the cover story?
Well, because unfortunately, from the experience that I've had, when I would say straight up that I'm Jewish, that I'm Israeli, unfortunately, a lot of them would just, curse me or block me. A lot of these conversations were, online. So they would block me right away, or they would curse me, or some of them even told me they'd be waiting for me at the end of days with their knives, and things like that. So sometimes it didn't go so well when I would tell them that I'm Jewish, or mostly when I would say I'm Israeli.
Yeah,
A lot
I
of
would imagine is being Israeli is a bigger problem than being Jewish.
Yeah, so it's what's really interesting is that especially the Arab Muslim world has this distinction, and I think it's spread almost to probably all over the world today, but especially then they have this distinction between Jews, Israelis, and Zionists. So sometimes I would speak to someone and I would say, "Yeah, I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli," and then they would say, "What do you mean? But are you Jewish? Are you Israeli? Or are you a Zionist?" And what do you mean? What's the difference? So they have this kind of distinction that Zionism is this racist, apartheid concept, colonialistic idea that the Zionists want to conquer Palestine and the entire world. And they don't understand that Zionism is the dream of every Jewish person to come back to their homeland, which is Israel. And if you're a Jew living in the States, So you can call yourself, an American Jew or French Jew or whatever it is. But in the end of the day, you're also Israeli, not because you have an Israeli passport or Israeli citizenship, talking about the state of Israel today, but you belong to the people of Israel, right? It makes you Israeli. You belong to Am Yisrael. You belong to the people of Israel. And that fact alone is something that the many of the Muslims that I've spoken to couldn't comprehend because in their eyes, the Jews today have no connection to the people of Israel, to Bnei
Yeah,
Israel,
that
the
was what I
children
was
of
going to
Israel.
ask because I've been reading the Quran, and the children of Israel are referenced a lot in the
Yeah,
Quran, and they're not referenced too positively, let us say, and they're referenced as well. They mean the Jews when they say the people of Israel in the Quran. They mean the Jews, but from what I understand, the Jews today are not the Jews that are referred in the Quran. Although the Jews that are referred to in the Quran are well, it always talks about how they're gonna burn in hell for all eternity and stuff like that. So
right.
please, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's actually a distinction in the Quran between Bnei Israel, right? In Arabic, it's Banu
Banu Israel.
Israel.
Oh.
So between them and Al-Yahud, the Jews. So Bnei Israel, the people of Israel, the children of Israel, according to Islam, were actually considered Muslims. Okay. This is a crazy concept. I'll explain it in a second. But most people, when they hear this, it's very hard to comprehend because how could someone be a Muslim before, the Prophet Muhammad? So, but according to the Quran, Bnei Israel were Muslim. Uh, Moses was Muslim. Abraham was Muslim, and
Adam.
even
Adam.
even exactly, even Adam Arishon was Muslim himself. So then you have to understand what does that mean? What does it mean to be Muslim? So that's why you have to understand Arabic. So Arabic, by the way, I also teach Arabic today. I have a course, a digital course. It's for Hebrew speakers, but even for English speakers, I think it's so important to understand Arabic because if you want to understand the culture and the religion and the mindset, you have to understand the language. That's really the key to understanding everything. So to understand the word Islam, you have to understand Arabic. It means submission, to submit yourself to the one true God. And how do you do that? You also have to believe in his prophets, because his prophets, the prophets of God, are the ones who give you the guidance to know what the right path is and how to believe in that one supreme God. So you have to believe in God and you have to believe in his prophets. That's what it means to be a Muslim in that term of being submitting yourself to God. So if that's the definition, then I think you and I can agree that we can call Bnei Israel and Moses and Abraham and all of them Muslims in that sense. So where does the problem start and where does it take a turn that the Jews are not connected to the people of
Can
Israel
I
that are
take a
mentioned in the
guess?
Quran?
I have
Yeah,
two
go for it.
guesses. Right. So the Jews that are mentioned in the Quran are probably not the people of Israel because they have twisted the message over time, and that's why a final messenger, Muhammad, was required. So that's guess
Exactly.
number one. Guess number two: the Jews of today. Um, my guess is that the Khazari theory is quite prevalent among the Muslims. I'll explain it right now. It's a theory that says that the Jews that come from Europe are essentially not Jews that came from the diaspora, that basically escaped or left for any reason the land of Israel during Roman times or later or earlier, whatever. Uh, these, in fact, are belonging to a tribe of, I guess, Mongols, you could say, called the Khazarites, and this tribe converted to Judaism I think, about 900 years ago, I believe it was, something like that,
Right.
1,900 years ago. and that these are actually the Jews, meaning that they do not come from Palestine, and so they have no claims on Palestine. So these are my two guesses about why the Muslims would say that the Jews today are not don't have anything to do with the so-called people of Israel.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head exactly. Those two guesses are the two main, issues that they bring up. So the first issue that you mentioned, which is the religious issue, is what's actually mentioned in the Quran, that the Jews actually left this righteous path of Islam, of submission to God. They changed the text of the Torah. They killed the prophets. They
Yeah.
worshipped idolatry. They did all these sins that actually moved away from their original religion, Islam, and they moved away from God. They betrayed him. They left him, and then God decided that he's going to leave them as well, and he doesn't need them anymore. So even in the Quran, it mentions that the people of Israel were the chosen people, were chosen to be above all the other nations, were chosen to bring light and guidance to the world, but they sinned. They messed up. They had a mission and they messed up. And they left God, so God left them. And then he tried plan B, which was, do you know?
It was Jesus.
Yeah, who was considered as well a Muslim,
Yeah.
right? So, and then that got messed up as well. And then the final prophet came along, which is in their eyes Prophet Muhammad, and he came along and received the Quran, which brings back the original truth of the original Islam that has been brought to the world from Adam, through Abraham, through Moses, through the children of Israel, but then it got lost along the way because they messed up the whole plan. So now he has to bring it back to the world. So that's the main point in Islam, which really is a huge contradiction to what's happening to the coming back of the people of Israel, of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. If everything we explained up until now is a core understanding, a core belief in Islam, then when the people of Israel, the Jewish people, come back to the land of Israel, then there's a big contradiction here. There's a big problem because either this theory is right or it's wrong. And if it's right, then the Jewish people are not supposed to come back to the land because they're cursed, they betrayed God, and they're meant to be left in the diaspora for all of eternity under the sovereignty of Islam. But the fact that we came back to our land, it causes this huge reaction, a negative reaction in the Islamic world, which causes them to feel like their religion, Islam, is under attack because this main theory is basically falling apart. And that's why the entire Muslim world had to come and fight against, and try to destroy the Jewish state, which was not even one day old,
I
right?
can
And
actually see how this leads to conspiracy theories, because if that event, the event of the mere establishment of the state of Israel, and I'm not going to go into details about was it born in sin, was it all happy and lilies or whatever.
right,
It was so unlikely, the event itself, that and it goes so harshly against some core beliefs in the grand narrative of Islam, you might say, that you have to explain it somehow. And the way that you explain it has to be, well, it can't be, well, a bunch of poor Jews came to this place and basically conquered it. That's explanation number one.
right,
Explanation number two is, well, these Jews have forces working behind the scenes that are so diabolical and so powerful that only by this mechanism can this thing be explained. Right? So I can see how, like, because it's so unlikely and because it goes so much against the narrative, that has to create some anti-Semitic beliefs and feelings. Right. So
yeah,
did you come
100%.
across any of that?
Yeah, 100%. You asked in the beginning if I tell you an interesting story. So, after I had a bunch of conversations, hundreds of conversations over the internet and then the phone and whatever, I decided, I want to go down to the street and actually speak with people face to face and experience firsthand. Um, I also wanted to record it, with like a hidden camera or something like that, but I was kind of scared that I would get caught. So I dressed up as an American, which for me isn't hard, of course. And I went into
Wait,
Bethlehem.
where is it? Where is Bethlehem? Please tell for people.
It's in Judea, which is called I don't like to use the word, but in the West Bank. But it's in Judea and Samaria, but in the area of Judea, which is south of Jerusalem, and of course the ancient city where King David was born. Um, and
Jesus
so I
as
went,
well, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I went into there. I went into East Jerusalem. I walked around and I kind of interviewed people. And using my cover story, I was saying that I'm an American student who's doing a project for my master's degree in the States, and I'm interviewing people about what they think the connection between the Jewish people and this land is. So I went around asking people what they think the connection is to this land. What's the connection between the Jewish people and this land? And all the answers that I received, I already knew from people that I've spoken to, over the internet. And that answer is there is no connection between the Jewish people and this land. And then you have to ask, the question, how can you say such a thing? I thought everybody knows that the Jewish people have a long history in this land. But because of this religious basis that we were talking about before, that the people of Israel sinned and they turned away and they became Jews and they disconnected themselves from the original Bnei Israel, right? So the Jews today have no connection to the original Bnei Israel. So they have no history in this land. They've never had sovereignty in this land. And you say, wait, what do you mean? What about King David, King Solomon? No, they were also considered Muslim. So even, they say there was never a temple. There was never a Bet Mikdash because King Solomon, who was a Muslim, he built the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah, I built the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I've heard of that. I've heard that too. And the mosque
Right.
was actually built, I think, in 600 AD. I think it was. Some maybe
Yeah,
even
a
later.
little, yeah, 691, I think.
Yeah. So, but you know what? Many people don't really care about that. Who was here first argument. I mean, it matters between the Jews and the Muslims, but I think generally worldwide, I don't think unless you're like hyper religious, I don't think you care so much about the who was here first argument. The argument that you care about most is can we have some peace and quiet and you guys shut up? Okay, I think that's like
Yeah, right.
so let's take a step back from well, do they think who was a Muslim, who was a Jew? I think it's very interesting that the entire narrative is different, right? I mean, because according to this belief, I understand. I'll try to summarize what you're saying. What is now called Israel, or geographically Palestine, for almost 2,000 years now, has always been Muslim. That's essentially the thing. Even before Muhammad, it's always been
Right,
Muslim.
right.
So yeah. But other than that, what other narratives did you hear that you thought people don't know that people don't know that this is what many of these people think and believe?
Right. So that was the going to be the second part of the story is I kept going and interviewing people, and then I went into this one guy's store. I sat with him in his office, and I asked him the same questions. He gave me the same answers, and then he asked me, "You did you not learn in university about the Balfour Declaration of 1917?" I said, I did, but what's the connection? He said, "Let me explain to you the true background to the 1917 Balfour Declaration." Because I actually asked him, I said, "Wait a second, if you think that the Jews have no connection historically to this land, then why did the Balfour Declaration promise a Jewish homeland in their historic homeland, in the land of Israel, right?" So he says, "Let me explain to you the true background." He says the Jews in England were murderers, rapists. They were stealing. They were committing all of the worst crimes you can possibly imagine. And the British just wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible. They just won a world war, a bunch of new pieces of land. So they decided to throw the Jews into Palestine. And now we, the Palestinians, have to deal with this garbage. So that was like a shocking,
Why
you know,
does he say that to you, knowing you're a Jew?
no, no, of course not.
Okay.
I was totally under my cover story of being just an American college student, you know, who's doing a project. Uh, I couldn't, I was, you know, in the middle of East Jerusalem. I couldn't let people there know that I was Jewish, especially coming and asking these kinds of questions. That wouldn't have been a good idea. So that was a very shocking story. And I've heard so many things like this. And the problem is that today there's so much incitement and propaganda that's, you know, just adding more and more oil to the fire and making the problem bigger. But actually, I want to talk about what you said before, that maybe, you know, most of the world about this doesn't really care about this religious, you know, conflict or the religious uh, war that's going on behind the scenes. And what they really care about is let's just find a solution to for you guys to live in peace and leave everybody else, you know, alone, right? But the problem is if the basis for this entire conflict is religious, and the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict is just one symptom of a much deeper problem that's been around for 1400 years since the founding of Islam, then there's no way around it. You can't put this aside and say, guys, let's not talk about religion. It doesn't matter who was here first. It doesn't matter if the people of Israel were Muslim and then they sinned and God left them and all these. It doesn't matter. Let's just try to figure out the situation today. It doesn't work like that because this is the basis for everything. And what I think is that, you know, lahefech, the opposite. We have to go and deal with the deepest roots of this conflict, and only there can we find the solution. I think that if there's a way to change somehow the education in the Muslim world and explain to them that there doesn't have to be such a big contradiction between the fact that the Jews came back to their homeland, accept the fact that this is their homeland. Yeah, you know what? Yes, the people of Israel sinned. Everybody sins, but that doesn't mean that they have to be left in the diaspora for all of eternity and burn in hell for all of eternity. They sinned,
It actually
and
does mean that because the Quran says it explicitly, and you can't argue with that. The
yeah,
Quran is the word of God, so you can't argue with
right.
that.
But there are other verses that say otherwise. There are other teachings that say otherwise. You can always put the focus on certain things. You know, if you take the difference, I remember when ISIS was really like strong a few years ago. So I was having all these conversations with people, and you know, then I would ask them, so what do you think about ISIS, right? And they would say they're not even Muslim. What they're doing is against Islam. And then if you would ask the people in ISIS what they think about the regular Muslims around the Muslim world, then ISIS would tell you that they're not Muslims and they need to be killed because they're not truly believing in Islam. So everybody puts, you know, their focus on what they want to put their focus on. And I think most of it is an issue of education. If there's a way to re-educate the Muslim world, or at least the Muslims here in Israel, in, you know, Judea and Samaria, Gaza, Jerusalem, and the Arab Israelis, to re-educate them and say, listen, all you need to do is put down this one weapon, which is your belief that you think that the Jewish people have no connection to this land, they don't belong here, and they need to be eradicated from this land because it only belongs to the Muslims. If you just put that aside and you understand that the Jewish people have a long history in this land, there are verses in the Quran that you can use to understand that, right? And you can believe, and you can still be a good Muslim by believing that, and you can live side by side with the Jewish people who came here and you know, developed the land and brought jobs and brought only good things. So put this religious issue, let's understand it. Let's not, you can't put it aside, but we have to understand it and explain it in a different way that they're able to somehow accept it.
Look, if I were a Muslim, I will never even accept what you're saying. And like I can think this through, like try to think as a Muslim, because first of all, I could say, well, you can't tell me to ignore the truth. Okay, you're telling me, look,
Right. What you believe is the truth.
all you have to do is to change the truth. But I don't. Who are you to tell me to change the truth? That's first of all. Secondly,
Right.
well, you're saying, well, why don't you re-educate 2 billion people? No, how about a few million colonizers go back to Europe or wherever, right? So
Right. It
that
sounds like an easier plan.
yeah, I mean, it is an easier plan by orders of
Right.
magnitude, right? Right.
Well,
So
look, the truth is that there are Muslim scholars in the Muslim world who already believe that according to Islam, that this land does belong to the Jewish people. The Jewish people need to come back to their homeland, and that the Muslims living in this land, the only way that they should continue to live here is if they accept that fact. So
do you want to take
there
a
are,
break for a second and kill that fly?
yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to. He's been attacking me longer than the Israeli Palestinian conflicts have been going on.
Okay, so I've had another thought that occurred to me. Do you think that this thing about, well, the Jews of today not being okay? Let me try to organize my thoughts here. The Jews of today, according to the narrative that you're describing, if I were a Muslim, I can call them Jews because, like, these group are the Jews of today, but they are not the Jews referred to in the Quran.
Right.
Okay, and these people have this like Jewish
Or
supremacy
it's more
ideology.
it's right. It's more like they're not the Bnei Israel
Yeah,
that
they're not
refer
Banu
to them.
Israel. Yeah, okay,
Right.
the people of Israel that are referenced in the Quran many times. Now,
Right.
so these are the Jews, and these Jews in their theology they have this inbuilt idea of Jewish supremacy of some sort, and this idea leads to Zionism.
Hmm.
Is that about right?
Um, I think so. I mean, no one's ever told me that it's because of this built-in. Actually, maybe some people have said it straight up. Um, Look, I know that there are a lot of people around the world who understand this concept of like the chosen people in a negative way, that they think that the chosen people of Israel is because they think that they're superior to other people, to other nations, to other religions. Um, but I think in Islam it's not necessarily like that because it says in the Quran that they are the chosen people, but they were the chosen people before they sinned. So it's maybe that they might think that today Zionism is kind of like an offshoot of that what once was them being the chosen people because they're such a sinful nation. They took that to a different extent, and now they're trying to conquer Palestine and conquer the world. Um, but I don't even think you need to go that deep into like trying to understand, the psychology of it. Because, for example, I spoke to this girl one time from Jordan, and we were actually good friends. She knew I was Israeli. She knew I was Jewish. She didn't have a problem with it. We would speak on a regular basis. And one time she asked me, she said, "Can you explain to me what's the Holocaust and what is Zionism?" I said, "Wow, you actually don't know what those things are. Like that's crazy." But of course, I'll be glad to explain it to you. So I start explaining to her, and she says, "Okay, while you're typing to me, I'm searching on Wikipedia." And then she sends me, "Wait, wait, wait, wait. The Jewish people the Zionists want to conquer the world starting from Palestine?" I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, look," she sends me a screenshot from Wikipedia in Arabic, of course, that says that the main goal of the modern Zionism is to conquer the entire world starting from Palestine. So when you have information like that all over, all over the internet and all over social media and TikTok and all of these things, then of course this is what people think. So again, the problem is that today there's so much incitement, there's so much propaganda, there's so much hate that it's so difficult to really deal with the situation. If we were able to have normal conversations between people who don't have this underlying basis of hate, and they're not, brainwashed all day from all of this incitement, then I think it would be much easier to actually, you know, find the solution. And maybe, yes, maybe we would be able to help re-educate them in a different way. And I think that there are parts of the Muslim world that are starting to come to that realization. There are Muslim scholars who understand that. The problem is that they're such a small minority, their voice isn't heard. But there are connections here in Israel. There are different organizations who connect with these people. The peace treaties that have been signed, the normalization with the Abraham Accords with Morocco and with the United Emirates and all of these other places, uh, need to be used as a tool to not just have normalization with the on the governmental, political, and even maybe some military level or whatever, intelligence level. Because when I speak to people there, I've spoken to people from the United Emirates and from Morocco, and they don't like Israel. They hate us. They think that we're enemies. They believe in everything we spoke about before. And they told me we don't support our government. We don't support this decision to have a peace treaty with Israel, who's an enemy, but we don't rebel against it. So that's not true peace. True peace, I think if Israel signing peace treaties with Muslim countries, there needs to be a plan set in place with these countries as part of the peace treaty to educate about Israel. It doesn't have to be, of course, it's going to take, maybe a few generations even, but we have to have this, perspective of a few generations that were willing to invest in education in the Muslim world
Why
and
do
in
only the
Israel.
Arabs need to be educated? Why
So,
don't the Jews need to be
so,
educated?
so that's exactly what I was going to say. I think that the truth is that it starts from us. I think that we need to re-educate ourselves as a nation, right? The fact that we, I'll tell you one thing that someone told me was really like a stab in the heart. I had a friend who lived in East Jerusalem that we studied together in a tour guide course in Jerusalem. So we
An
were together
Arab?
for, yeah, Arab Muslim from East Jerusalem. There were like 12 um, Muslims from East Jerusalem, and we were all good friends. We all, we would speak about all of this openly. That's really what I focused on the entire year. Instead of becoming a tour guide, I was just having these interesting conversations with them. But one of them told me one time, he said, "Look, why should we accept that this land belongs to you when half of your people don't even believe in that?" So that was like a real smack in the face, and it made me understand that the education has to start from us, not from them. We have to truly believe in our connection to this land, in our historic connection, in our religious connection. Why, we say in Hebrew, Lama lo Uganda? Why not Uganda? Why do we have to be specifically in this land? Why can't we do it somewhere else where it's much easier and there are less people around us who hate us and fight against us? Let's just go find a quiet place and build a Jewish state there. Why does it
Well,
have to be
I
here?
don't follow the argument because essentially what I've just heard you say is we need to educate the Muslims and the Arabs that the Jewish people belong in Israel. And then I asked you, well, but why do you only have to educate the Arabs? Why don't you have to educate the Jews? And then you said, yeah, it's true. We also have to educate the Jews, um, and to have them believe more strongly that the Jewish people belong in Israel.
Right.
So essentially, what I've heard you say is like you well, you're negotiating, but you're not really negotiating.
What do
From
you
what
mean?
I, because you're saying like I'll teach this group what I think to be true, and then I'll teach this group also what I think to be true. Like there's no really you haven't really suggested a place to meet in the middle or to uh, learn something about the Muslims or the Arabs, from what I gathered.
Well, First of all, I do think that we have to learn more about the Muslim world. We have to learn more about the Arabs. We have to learn Arabic. We have to know how to communicate with them. But I think the real root of the issue is that we don't believe strongly enough in our own truth.
What would change if you did?
I think that if we believe strongly in our own truth, I think the Muslim world would connect to that truth. Because look, there's this, concept in Islam that kullu min Allah, everything is from God, right? So when they see that the Jewish people are fighting against each other, we're at the brink of a civil war, half of us don't even believe that this land belongs to us. We want to give it back to the Arabs. We conquered Jerusalem and we reconquered, we retook control of our capital, of our homeland, Jerusalem and Temple Mount, and we gave it right back to them. So what do they see? They say, "Oh,
No,
okay,
I
this
think they
is
don't know that, by the way. I think if you were to ask the average Muslim, he does not know that the people who control the Temple Mount are, in fact, the Jordanian Waqf. They don't know that. They think the Israelis control it. And I've actually spoken to Palestinians about it, and they always say that the Jews control Al-Aqsa compound, the Temple Mount. That's how they call it. So they don't know that the actual authority in the place is the Jordanian Waqf. So
right.
I don't think
I mean,
that works well for your argument.
no, well, some of them do because I've also spoken to people who have told me. They said
Mm.
you literally gave back. I'm talking about more like Arab Israelis or some from Jerusalem who are more connected to they actually know what's going on here. But some of them have told me you literally gave back what you claim to be your holiest place. You gave it back to us. So so what do you want? What do you want from us? And you have people the what's it called, the group of the ultra Orthodox Jews who are like
Neturei
pro-Palestinian.
Karta.
Yeah, Neturei Karta. You have these Neturei Karta and Satmar and all these people who think that the Jews don't belong in this land. And you have the left and you have the right and you have you're almost a civil war and all these things. He said, and all of this is from Allah. All of this is from God. So this is all proof that you guys don't belong here, that this land doesn't belong to you, and that you're not supposed to rule here. And it's all just, it's all just a game that God is playing with you to bring you all into one place, and then it'll be easier. There's a verse in the Quran that says that in the end of days, Allah will bring the Jewish people back to not will bring them all to one place. So there are Muslim scholars who wrote that this is the Holy Land, right? The land that they were once in. But today it's explained as that God is going to bring all the Jews into one place, so the work will be easier for the Muslims to get rid of them, right? So
I
again,
have.
it's all an issue of education.
So can you explain to me the vision? Like, okay, let's say, like, explain to me like how this works. Now, let's say that all the Jews in Israel believe more firmly that there should be a Jewish state there, and for religious reasons, historical reasons, however you perceive it. So
Right.
how does that change its relationship with the Muslims?
I think that actually it'll cause more of an understanding in the Muslim world than what's going on today.
How?
I think that the fact that we believe 100% that this land is ours, and we make it clear to the Muslim world that this land is ours, and that they can live here in peace with us as long as they understand this one fact that this land belongs to us, and there is zero chance that they're going to have any kind of control over this land. Period. I think that they would respect us much more than they would respect us now. I think then we would have a chance to actually live with them in peace. Most people think that this is, if you even talk about these things, it's going to it's going to heat up the Middle East. When we make these like little baby steps, like, for example, on the Temple Mount, right? So as you're saying, most of the Muslims think that the police and the army, the Israeli police and army are those who control the Temple Mount because that's what they see on the media, and on the news all the time. that there's, protests or whatever, and then the army comes in, the police come in, and
I've
then there's a
actually
whole
spoken to Palestinians who believe that also, and
right,
they're
because that's
closer. And
yeah, but that's what they see. That's what they understand. That's what they see on social media all the time. So, and then what happens when there's a terrorist attack, and then we put up the metal detectors, so they can't come in with guns and kill people anymore, right? It creates this whole crazy almost intifada, right?
yeah,
So, but the problem is because we're making these like little steps to show like, oh, we're in control, but we're not fully taking responsibility and control over our land. So they see it as these colonialists who are coming from the outside and trying to conquer all the time and trying to take a little more and take a little more and take a little more. And they don't there's no one explaining to them that that's not the truth. The truth is that this land belongs to us from God. We are the original Bnei Israel that's written in your Quran. This land belongs to us. And the only way that there will be peace in this land, you're not going to get rid of us. God is on our side. You're not going to get rid of us. The only way for you guys to live in peace with us is for you to understand this. I think that they will respect that much more than the gibberish that we're trying to speak to them today.
okay. So I have to admit I don't quite see the argument here, but I did in your last sentence I did see something here because what you've suggested is to okay. So you've said essentially, from what I've gathered, you said two things. The first thing was, well, if we Jews, right, believe firmly enough, and you Israelis believe firmly enough that this is our place, then they will see and they will kind of understand. And I don't see an argument here. I think I can mirror this. Like I can say, well, if the Jews see that they live under the Muslims and they have to pay the jizya, which was a poll tax that was used for Christians and Jews back in the Islamic caliphates, well, they'll just live with it and they will understand it. This argument kind of works, but it's not great for a relationship, let's say. And you spoke about true peace and stuff like that. And also, I don't see any evidence that this would work. But then you went on to say that the Jews should conduct themselves in a manner that when they speak to the Muslims, they should say things like, we are Banu Israel from your Quran. We are these people from and this I can see more sense in that, because essentially what you're doing is you're showing that you understand what they're thinking and what they believe in, and you're saying, listen, I am using your frame of reference. I'm just pointing at another thing that you're missing. And this seems much more reasonable to me than to say, listen, your entire frame of reference is kind of fucked. And this is, but when you do this, when you say, listen, this is in your Quran, here we are in your Quran. So when you're saying re-education, here's the thought that I've just had. You re-educate the Jews on the Quran verses that are relevant. The Jews should know these verses. They should quote them by heart, maybe even in Arabic.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you. I think the underlying basis is that not to say that their entire point of reference is messed up, but the opposite, that there's so much in common. There's so much in common between their Quran and our Tanakh, in our beliefs and their beliefs. But this one main point this is the real root of the issue, is that they believe that we left God and God left us. And this is the basis for everything. And if you could change that one point in their perspective, in their mindset, in their education, I think that there would be a much stronger basis for peace, because then they understand, okay, the Jewish people do belong to this land.
Wait, but that would undermine the entirety of the Islamic idea, if I understand it correctly. I don't think you can do that, because the entirety of the Muslim narrative from the time of Muhammad and the narrative of the Quran essentially is that basically everyone got everything wrong. First there were the Jews, and then they went astray, and God sent them Isa, Jesus, as another prophet, and the Jews killed him, and now they're also referred to as the killers of prophets in the Quran. So the
Right.
Jews killed him, and then there were the Christians, but then the Christians have gone astray as well, and then God has to send Muhammad to essentially fix everything and bring again the light of Islam and the true religion, right? So essentially, like, if you say, look, God is with the Jews, you've essentially upended the entire idea, underlining ideas that are under
The
Islam.
underlying, right, the underlying
Underlying,
ideas,
thank you.
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I got messed up in there. Maybe I'm too
It's
excited.
okay.
So these are fundamental ideas. I don't think, like, how do you? I don't see how you pull something out of Islam, but it's something that's fundamental to Islam. Am I
Right.
wrong?
No, it's a great question. I don't know if I have an exact answer. I really think that this is something that needs to be discussed with Muslim scholars to really, find the way to find the verses in the Quran that still support this, that you can still understand and believe in Islam without it all falling apart because of this
But isn't this
one issue.
propaganda? Like imagine someone were to go to, I don't know, like whatever, like a psychology professor, okay? And he tells the psychology professor, listen, I need you to go through the literature in your field and find me justification to ensure that authoritarian rule is the best rule for everyone. And other than that, you can keep your profession and everything, but please go through the literature and find the justification for the narrative that I'm trying to implement, right? So obviously there's something wrong there's something weird happening here, right?
Right.
You're saying, let's go to the Muslim scholars. It's kind of the same. Do you see the analogy?
Yeah, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't think it needs to be exactly like that. I think that um look, let's say you and I are having an argument here, right? So you can explain to me something and say, look, you said this and you said that, and I don't think that you're right. Now I can listen to what you say, and I can accept the fact that I was wrong on certain things. That's how we grow. It doesn't necessarily mean that my entire basis for what I understand is wrong. Meaning you can you can still be Muslim. You can still believe that Muhammad was a prophet. He had certain beautiful things to bring to the world. Focus on those beautiful things. You can still fast on Ramadan. You can still keep all the commandments that you believe that you're supposed to keep as long as you're not harming anyone else. So you can keep the positive things of Islam and leave the negative things. It doesn't have to all fall apart.
But if you're
I
a
understand.
true follower of Muhammad, well, you're a follower of Allah essentially, not of Muhammad. But you still
Right.
have to venerate Muhammad in some way, right, as a paragon of virtue. If you're a true follower of Muhammad, you're not allowed to say, well, these are the positives and these are the negatives. Everything has to be positive, right?
Yeah,
There's no
but the
room to
true
question anything because
right.
the Quran is the literal. I mean, think about it this way. I'm sorry I'm bashing you, but this is how I think. I would bash myself also if I was sitting in your chair, right?
No, it's okay.
Yeah, this is how I think. So think of it this way: you're a religious Jew, right? So okay, which part of the Tanakh was written by God? Which part of the Tanakh is the literal word of God?
The Chumash,
Yeah,
how
the
it's
first
called in
five
English.
books, right? The Torah.
Right,
Okay,
right,
so basically, okay, these are the literal words of God. So, but most of these are stories, right?
right.
So you can interpret them in different ways. Some verses go like, listen, don't do this, don't do this. But most of the Torah is just stories, things that happened, or maybe things that didn't happen, but that God saw fit to tell you for some reason, right? We can.
Okay.
Is this about right for the Jewish interpretation of the Torah?
Yeah.
Okay, but the Quran is different. Is essentially different because the Quran in its entirety is the word of God. If you're a Muslim, that's what you believe. Okay,
Right.
and the Quran doesn't tell you so many stories. You've read it, I assume. It doesn't tell you
Yeah,
stories. It tells you facts,
right.
right? So I don't see how, like, when we come from a Jewish or even a Christian perspective, and we think of the stories from the what the Christians would call the Old Testament and stuff, we think of these as stories, and we're like, okay, as time grows, as time moves forward, we can we reinterpret the stories to mean something fundamental about the reality that is always happening, something like that, right? You can do that. You can't do that with the Ten Commandments, but you can do it with most of the Old Testament, with the Torah, okay, like Genesis and whatever. But in the Quran, it's not it's not possible to do that because like one of the fundamental cores of Islam is that you believe that the Quran is the literal word of Allah, right? So if it's not a story and it's a set of instructions and it's a set of rules and it's a set of well, who's going to hell and who isn't, and Allah is strict in punishment, but He's also all forgiving, and He will forgive you if you do this, but He will never forgive you if you do that, and you will be in fire for all eternity if you do this, whatever, etc., etc. Where is the room for reform? I mean, I'm asking genuinely.
Right.
Have you given this any serious thought? Like,
Yeah, listen, again, I think that this is something that really to go down into the details needs to be discussed with Muslim scholars who exist, who believe that there's a different way of understanding the Quran where the Jewish people today are still do belong to Bnei Israel that are mentioned in the Quran, and that this land still belongs to them. So there definitely is a way. I actually just recently discovered that these Muslim scholars exist because the truth is, unfortunately, the past I've been dealing with this about 7 years, and I've been speaking to probably now it's in the thousands of people, um, and even online there websites called um, like a chat with an imam and things like that. And I've even spoken with Muslim scholars that unfortunately they see the things the way that we explained before, that there's a contradiction and not they I've never heard that there's another way of looking at understanding the Quran, and for it to actually go hand in hand with the fact that the Jewish people came back to their homeland, right? So now I've started to actually understand that there are some Muslim scholars that do believe this, and I think that we have to, maybe myself. I know that there are people who are already doing this, but I set it as a goal that I want to connect with these people and understand what they think,
oh, please
and
connect them with me as well.
yeah, for sure,
I
I would
wonder
love
if
to.
they'll talk to me though, because I do speak to Muslims, but they won't come on this channel.
Yeah,
So,
I
so
actually have a dream to also have a podcast actually in Arabic, and to bring, Arabs and Muslims from all over the world. But I know it's very difficult. Nobody wants uh, to take part in that, unfortunately. But I think that there's definitely a way to kind of interpret and understand the verses in the Quran in a different light that will enable a situation where you can still be a good Muslim, you can still believe in the Quran, and you don't have to hate the Jews. There has to be a
oh
way.
no, I don't think they would say that they hate the Jews. I don't think they would
or
say that.
or the Israelis or the Zionists or the fact that there's a Jewish state in Palestine, right? So-called Palestine. So there has to be a way that you can be a good Muslim and you can live side by side under in the Jewish state in this land and understand that there's no contradiction between the two. There has to be a way, and it's part of my goal is really to find out how to make that happen. But I think that this is also something that needs to be dealt with on
On an
the national
international level.
international level.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, peace treaties that are signed between Israel and the United Emirates. This is something that should be in the plans. Let's get together and figure out a way to understand Islam in a way that we can teach it to the people so that there doesn't have to be a conflict. I think that's the solution, right? You said before in the beginning that most people don't care too much about this religious side, and they just want to find a way, for everyone to be sit quietly. But this is what we have to focus on if we want to find a way to peace, not how to portion up the land
Let
and
me
how
ask you another thing. If you were on the other side, okay, so essentially, because what you're doing, and I think I've heard this to you before, that what you're essentially doing is saying, listen, they need to change to fit my perspective, and the Jews need to change to fit my perspective, something like that. So what I'm asking you is, what do you think they will tell you if you suggest this? Maybe because
I,
maybe who needs to be educated is essentially the Zionists. They need to be educated to stop with their Jewish supremacy ideas or something like that.
right.
So why,
No,
why
so,
re-educate 2
obviously,
billion when you can educate a couple of million?
right. Obviously, there's going to be a big pushback from the Muslim world. Obviously, they're going to see it um, the way that you just presented it. But education is not something that happens in the span of a conversation or in the span of a few years. I think it's something that, takes 10, 20, 30 years. And that's something that we need to, maybe quietly and under the table, kind of under the radar, start, building these relationships with those who the Muslim scholars who already believe in this, with the Muslim countries that we have peace treaties with, that, I'm sure, for example, in Jordan, I'm sure that they would be happy for their own population to somehow get re-educated and stop fighting, all the time against Israel and try, there are all these deals that are going on between Israel and Jordan, like gas and water and all these things, right? And the Jordanian population, which is like, they say somewhere from between 50 or 70% Palestinian, are of course anti-Israel, and they put a stop a lot of times to these projects, which is detrimental to their own people, to their own
But
state.
the Muslim narrative, if I understand it correctly, the Muslim narrative is that the Arab countries are essentially a bunch of dictatorships that are cooperating with Israel to a certain extent. And if these countries were real democracies, all of Israel's neighbors would go to war with it tomorrow. That's the narrative, as far as I understand it. Like it's part of the injustice that the Hashemite kingdom controls and educates its subjects, right? And it's part of the injustice. Like the entire problem of the Middle East and Israel and the United States and the colonization of the West, the Arab countries are part of it.
Right,
This is how I understand their narrative, and I try to
right.
listen carefully to what they're saying.
Yeah, that's a different problem, which I don't have a solution for,
Well,
but which is really, the Westernization of it is kind of like it's not a colonialization, but it's the kind of like the Westernization of the Middle East, and conquering and taking control, and then putting in place different rulers who the West thinks should be in control because it's better for the West. But they have no connection to the people in these new states that were created that were never even states before, right?
that's
Because
why
it's
the
a tribal,
Iranians are significant. That's why the Islamic Revolution of Iran is so significant, because they kicked off the Western influence, and look what we have. That's the
right?
alternative. But many people in the Muslim street, so-called street, shall we say, are very empathetic to the
Yeah,
Muslim revolution, although they're not exactly friends of the Shiites. Well,
right.
that's a subject I can talk about for hours. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
I,
you know how they say your enemy's enemy is your friend,
yeah,
right?
indeed.
So,
But again, so who's your friend? Who's the enemy of your enemy? Is it the dictatorships or is it the people?
no, I think the enemy is, the West, the United States and
Ah,
Israel.
I was looking at it from the perspective that the enemy is Iran.
Ah,
But yeah,
no, but I'm saying today, yeah, it's interesting because it goes both ways. Some groups like Hamas, which are Sunni Muslims, are now have a connection with Iran, who are Shiites, right? And they have funding, and their officials go there and they get training from there and all these things. Um, Even though they're like the biggest enemies, the biggest rivals in their own history. But because they have a common enemy, which is Israel and the West, the United States, so they get together to fight against us, right? Just going back to what we spoke about before, um, again, I think that where we actually have to start is from ourselves. We have to start from educating ourselves uh, properly in a way that we understand our connection to this land, that our connection to this land is unwavering, is strong, and that we will be able to radiate that to the rest of the world. That's number one, because without that, we really have no chance.
I have a ton of
Uh,
ton of questions just about that. But for example, the question that comes to mind is, well, what if you're a Jewish Israeli but you're not religious? But
right?
I actually have a ton of questions about that, but we're out of time.
Oh,
So
are we?
yeah.
So let me just one interesting thing. There's someone very famous scholar, Jewish scholar, who was called Vilna Gaon, Gra, and he wrote that the Plishtim, the Philistines in the Tanakh, were their entire mission, like God-given mission, is to cause the people of Israel to understand who they really are. Meaning the Plishtim always fought against the different kingdoms of Israel. And he brings all the different examples and shows how in each example, there's the outcome is always that the people of Israel actually have a deeper understanding of who they really are. And I think that today it's really interesting that the Arabs here in this land chose to call themselves Palestinians, which actually goes back, the original name goes back to the Philistines, to the Plishtim, and they kind of are taking up that same mission, which is they're pushing against us, but the real God-given mission is for them to cause us to understand who we really are. And once that mission is manifested, then I think that most of the problems will go away.
Okay. Well, how can we find your book?
You can look up online when a Jew and a Muslim talk. I have a website, Moriel,
You can send it to me.
Moriel
I'll
dash.
put it in the description.
Yeah, we'll put it up.
Okay.
And Yeah, it's available now on pre-sale. Um, and if whoever buys the book is actually helping me with the taking part in the publication process, so it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Moriel. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And if you have some of your Muslim friends they would like to come on, please connect us. I can hide their faces and their voices if they want.
I will be in touch with you about that. If I
All
can
right.
get someone, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.